going through, seeing what the house looks like, walking through in a more virtual reality space.
Eventually, but technology's got a long way to go.
Alright guys, so welcome to another episode of Foxy TV. We're doing it a little bit differently today. We're going to talk about virtual styling, virtual staging. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to tell you, we obviously are a physical styling company, so we obviously have our thoughts as to why one would be better placed than the other. But I truly feel that virtual staging actually has its right place in a situation where you have a tenanted property and you can't displace those tenants and you really want to get eyes on the property. A virtual styled listing, it does work wonders to get people through the door. However, once they're through the door, it can have quite a significant impact. So I do see the benefit there. Budget also needs to dictate some decisions, and for some people, unfortunately, it can't stretch far enough to get the physical styling in. So I do understand those limitations. I definitely do, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We are going to run through a couple of exciting things that are out there at the moment. So unless you're living under a very, very big rock, everybody would know that the significant advancements in AI have seen some developments in our world as well as the rest of the technological world. I've been keeping my eye on these options and these things that are out there, because having all your eggs in a basket where you have physical styling, had that ever goes off into a virtual reality type world, obviously then we don't have a business anymore. So I guess it's sort of like a responsible business owner type thing, keeping our eyes across everything that's happening out there. And oh my gosh, it's moving so quickly. But today, snapshot in time, we're going to look at a couple of different options that are out there at the moment. Mitch has been out on site. We're on site down at the Gold Coast today. We have taken footage of a property and we're going to show you the differences across 3 different apps or AI softwares that are available, and then obviously show the befores and afters of everything. So what I really want to touch on are the benefits. Obviously, honestly, I think everybody can see and you know those differences. When you see something that's virtually styled, although it has come a really, really long way from where it used to be. Rooms are less inclined now. You used to see the rooms were stretched. You used to see the furniture was placed halfway across a window to make a room look larger. I think that happens less and less now when you're doing styling through a quality real estate photographer, and their business in-house is offering that. So there are very good quality virtual styling options out there. Now, what we're looking at though are these AI options. Now, these are available to the general public. Some of them are available without a subscription. And I do see the pathway of virtual styling going down this more AI-based route. So we've used the 3. Mitch is going to list them on screen here. There's more than this that are out there. So going through the differences, honestly, you just put it in. You tell it what style you want to go with on some. You give it some other parameters on others if you want to go Scandinavian and white. You give it a bit of a brief and then it auto-generates it and pops it in place. Now, what used to take a couple of days now takes a couple of minutes. And I think that's where the significant takeaway here is, how quickly that can come together. I see this having great benefit if you're trying to design your own home and you're not sure what style you want to go with and you want to get some sort of inspiration as to how you could go. I see great benefit down the track of having this happen and having someone being affiliated with what these AI options are creating, and then you can literally press purchase and have it all purchased from Target. So the options that the AI present to you are literally just from one store, and I see that I could imagine that a store like Temple and Webster are going to be all over that, because they offer a full house suite worth of furniture as well as white goods and anything else you can possibly think of, even to your garden shed. So I do see that coming in the near future. If not, Temple and Webster, get onto it. For styling in the real estate world, now you can go through and have a look at these 3. We've got them one after another. Now, when you're looking at them, you can see, obviously, we've got a tiled area in this particular formal living. You've got a carpeted space next to a tiled hallway. You can already see from these virtually styled, the virtual overlay, that the sofa, for example, in one of these images is actually stretched out across the tiled surface. That already is giving disappointment when a buyer walks through the door. You can then also see that whilst this is great quality, you actually have a floating armchair in one of the images. So again, the perception is there, and that's only going to get better. That's just a small hiccup, honestly, that's going to get changed. Honestly, 6 months and it'll be gone. But you can definitely then see that the oversized sofas and those pieces, they're not going to fit into that room. So you get to the final image of what we've got, and it is a big sofa, so it is quite a large room, but then you miss out on the perspective of that space, given that you don't have the hallway wall, and we're only working with the 3 walls that are given to the virtual AI to operate in. So that is one of the biggest benefits with styling, and then the scope that it provides to the photographer to provide the photography for a realestate.com listing. The perspective of having all 4 walls gives a really good overview of the property. Now, as you carry through, it's only going to be more and more defined. A space then, when you get to a combined dining living space, it's not going to feel the right proportions. Now, I'm not here to tell you why it's not going to work and why you're going to be disappointed on first impressions when you have someone walk through the door and it's completely different to what they're expecting. I want to talk about where is it going to go from now? What is it possibly going to look like? And what place does physical property styling have in the real estate world? Probably 20, I don't think everyone says it's not too far away from now, but let's say 10, 15 years from now. So I think we had a really great insight into this in COVID. So during COVID in Queensland specifically, real estate was still moving and we were still allowed to move houses. All of that was still allowed to happen. Now, we had an overwhelming amount of people who would list their property. There were digital inspections at that time. So an agent would go in with their phone and do a Zoom walkthrough. Prior to that, you'd have it photographed vacant. You'd do a Matterport walkthrough, which is clicking through the property and doing like a 3D walkthrough. And then sometimes the agent would do a video on their phone. Now, what would happen is a couple of weeks later, we'd be asked to come in and style those properties. Now, this didn't happen once or twice. This probably happened about 30 or 40 times during our COVID lockdown times in Brisbane while we were operating. What happened 10 or 12 times alongside that is that these properties, after we had styled, they actually sold the first weekend after the styling was in there. So the perspective that in particular in these smaller units where it's very, very difficult to give any sort of dimension, especially if you go to a fish lens, it's very inaccurate and it's not a real representation of the space. And it gave buyers hesitation. It gave them a worrying fear so that they didn't purchase the property. You pop styling in, showed them the video walkthrough with it in there, and it was purchased the very weekend that it was put in. We then had to go collect the styling 2 or 3 days after that. That happened multiple times. So that was a really great insight into what I believe will happen as we go into more of a virtual world. I think one of the biggest, actually this is Jake. Jake thinks one of the biggest hurdles a real estate agent and the whole home buying experience has is the need to spend your entire Saturday out looking at physical properties. You're out, you're using your entire day. You've got 2 days off a week and using one of those out and about. And on some days it's quite a fruitless experience.
I think that it is probably inevitable that at some point in the future, virtual reality or augmented reality, I guess to some degree, and AI and different technologies will make it so that open homes change in a very big way. I think what we've seen through COVID, in particular where we did a lot more, Matterport and that sort of technology where there's a lot more virtual walkthroughs, I think what we saw out of that is that people are resistant to that if the technology is not as good as it maybe will be one day. People still prefer to walk through physically a house and they get to see the house and be in it and feel it, see the size, and you really get a sense of it. My personal belief is that at some point virtual reality will get, the technology itself will get good enough that we may not actually be able to tell a big difference between physically being in a space and virtually being in a space. That is a long way away, but I think that is what eventually changes it. My personal opinion on things like open homes is it's actually not geared towards the buyer. It's actually reasonably inconvenient to have to line up the number of different viewings you want to go to on a Saturday, make sure the timings work, get between the houses. It's inconvenient. It's something that if there's an easier way to approach it, if there's a way that I can do it in my own time from my own location and it doesn't feel any different, then it makes sense that that will be where people gravitate towards. But like I said, I think that's a very long way away. So I think the short term is that the technology is just not where it needs to be for that to work. As a first viewing, potentially there's something there that lets people get a good idea whether they want to go and see it in person, and maybe that's something that gets used a little bit more, potentially, or I guess especially as the technology starts to improve with the likes of AI. But the reality is we're always going to want to, when we're buying the biggest purchase of your life, potentially, it's something that people want to go and see and be in the space and see it in person. So, I think, like I said, eventually, but technology's got a long way to go.
So potentially, stage 1 has us on an AR headset. going through, seeing what the house looks like, walking through in a more virtual reality space, being able to see, feel the floor plan, seeing it all from the comfort of your home without having to leave the house. Then you're never going to get past needing to see the community in the neighbourhood, although it did happen during COVID. I do think you're still going to want to tangibly feel and touch that space. However, that virtual reality, that augmented reality won't happen, and it won't transition smoothly without the physical styling being there. I do genuinely believe, and I would love to know your thoughts on the scope and the possibility for styling, where it lays in the world of virtual reality and AR as we come into it over the next sort of 15 years. Some food for thought on Foxy TV this week, and we'll see what the comments get to.